I almost skipped a movie I actually ended up liking. Not because the trailer looked bad, but because the main actor had already been everywhere. And the thought of, haven't I seen enough of this person already, is becoming surprisingly common. We usually call it overexposure, but that explanation doesn't really go far enough here, because something stranger is happening in Hollywood right now. At a certain point, fame doesn't just sell a movie anymore, it starts interfering with the story itself. And once that happens, something really important breaks. The illusion. Movies depend on that illusion. You sit down, the lights go out, and for 2 hours, you agree to forget the real world. But when an actor is everywhere, in interviews, ads, memes, viral clips, you're not meeting the character for the first time anymore, you're meeting the celebrity again. And that small shift changes how we watch movies more than people realize. In the early 2000s, Jude became the textbook example. He appeared in so many major films in such a short span that it basically became a running joke. At the 2005 Oscars, Chris Rock even called it out on stage. Who is Jude Law? Why is he in every movie I've seen in the last 4 years? He's in everything. Even the movies he's not acting in, if you look at the credits, he made cupcakes or something. And later, after receiving backlash, he clarified, I didn't say Jude Law can't act, I didn't say he was in bad movies, I just said he's in every movie. And keep in mind, this was before the rise of social media, before constant access, and before celebrities became entire personal brands. Today, that same effect is amplified, because overexposure doesn't mean an actor is bad, it just means the illusion has less room to work. Take Timothée Chalamet. He's arguably the defining leading man of the moment. Young, talented, and constantly in rotation. People still debate his talent, but on screen the intention feels clear. Even at peak saturation, his characters remain distinct. There's variation in his performances, and he seems to be steadily becoming the kind of actor he's always said he wants to be. But the catch is, his visibility extends far beyond the roles he plays. Even with a relatively minimal social media presence, Timothée Chalamet still dominates the timeline. And the internet doesn't just show celebrities, it slowly constructs an identity around them. Small moments get clipped, and over time, those fragments assemble into a persona we feel like we already understand. So when he appears in a new film, we're not encountering the character on a blank slate. We're watching the performance through the version of him the internet has already built, and that familiarity subtly changes the experience. The performance we watch becomes a bit of a test. Not, who is this character, but can he still surprise me? We're no longer entering the film neutrally, we're evaluating. Somewhere in the back of our minds, we're waiting to see if the performance can make us forget how much of them we've already seen. And that pressure doesn't come from a lack of talent, it comes from fame raising the bar every single time. Because even range has a saturation point, and once someone feels too familiar, surprise has to work twice as hard. But sometimes the issue isn't saturation at all. Sometimes the issue is casting. A recent example of this is the backlash surrounding Emerald Fennell's upcoming adaptation of Wuthering Heights. For context, Wuthering Heights is a gothic novel about the obsessive love between Catherine Earnshaw and the outsider Heathcliff, and the lifelong revenge that follows after Catherine marries someone else. When it was announced that Jacob Elordi would play Heathcliff, the backlash wasn't really about his popularity, it was about whether he was the right fit for the character. In the novel, Heathcliff is repeatedly described as dark-skinned, called a gypsy, even a lascar. He's brought to Yorkshire from Liverpool during the height of the British slave trade, and his appearance marks him as racially ambiguous. And that ambiguity is central to how he's treated. He isn't just poor, he isn't just adopted, he is other. And that otherness shapes everything about the story. Scholars have debated Heathcliff's racial background for decades. Some interpret him as Romani, others suggest South Asian ancestry. Some argue he may be mixed race or black. Emily Brown never clarifies, but that ambiguity isn't incidental, it's structural. Heathcliff's outsider status fuels the novel's violence, its obsession, and its revenge. So when casting enters the conversation, that context matters. Casting a white actor doesn't automatically ruin the story, but it does risk flattening a character whose marginalization is written into the text. And audiences notice that. People often ask, he's been played by white actors before, so why does it matter now? Because major adaptations shape how millions of people see the story. They shape cultural memory and become the version most people know. At that level, nothing happens by accident. When you erase that ambiguity, it doesn't just reinterpret the story, it sets a new default, and that changes how the character is going to be understood going forward. Audiences today are extremely media literate, and they're not just watching the story, they're watching the casting too. When someone who's supposed to feel like an outsider is played by a star we all recognize, it shapes how we see them before they say a single line. Visual language tells a story, and that disconnect can pull your attention away from the story itself. But there is another layer that's harder to ignore: opportunity. In an industry where leads of color still only account for about 25% of top theatrical films, a number that actually declined this past year, choosing familiarity over fit reinforces the same small circle. This isn't about effort, it isn't about ability, it's about whether the casting actually serves the story. Because sometimes the problem isn't overexposure, it's miscasting, and audiences can feel the difference. Then there's the third category, when fame actively contradicts the role. Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the most recognizable people, and at a certain point, that level of recognition doesn't just follow him into a role, it competes with it. In one battle after another, he plays a man tied to radical movements, positioned as an underdog, shaped by resistance, paranoia, and moral urgency. On paper, it works. But in practice, the contrast is hard to ignore. When a character is meant to feel marginal, desperate, or at odds with power, and the actor embodying them is globally associated with extreme wealth and elite celebrity culture, a disconnect forms. You're not just watching a character, you're subconsciously comparing them to when you saw them on a super yacht last week. That contrast becomes a distraction. You don't see the character first, you see the status. And what's interesting is that the performance itself isn't bad. It's professional, but it doesn't feel singular. It doesn't feel like something only he could bring to the role. In fact, it feels replaceable. And that's where casting starts to work against the film. When a role doesn't require the specific presence of a megastar, and that presence actively contradicts the character, it becomes harder to justify why that star needed to be there at all. At that point, the performance doesn't necessarily fail, the illusion does. You're no longer watching a story unfold, you're watching a movie star play pretend. And in an era where we know everything about an actor's life, that kind of pretend is getting harder and harder to buy. So here comes the golden question. Who's really to blame? Not the actors. They're doing what any smart actor would do, building momentum while they can. Film careers are unpredictable. One hit doesn't guarantee the next. Being visible gives them leverage, and leverage gives options. It's not realistic to expect someone to turn down big roles when nothing is promised. I don't blame them for saying yes. The pressure comes from somewhere else. Big movies cost massive amounts of money. Marketing alone can cost tens of millions. When that much is on the line, the people financing these projects and distributing those films want reassurance, and recognizable names bring attention, and that attention can help secure funding. At that point, casting starts being strategic, and social media has turned that strategy into metrics. On the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Maya Hawke, best known for playing Robin on Stranger Things, spoke openly about the shift. She said, "The line between actor and celebrity has become extremely blurry. What I always wanted to be is an actor where the work is what the draw is, not the personhood," she explained. But the industry keeps changing, and you have to change with it and understand that all of these things are getting blurred. Then she shared something even more revealing.
Also, how difficult it is to get things made. Right, but just so you know, if you have over this many followers, you can get the movie funded. Well, I want to make the movie, so I talk to so many smart directors who tell me that they get I'm talking to them about how I'm going to delete my Instagram, and they're like, just so you know, when I'm casting a movie with some Producers, they hand me a sheet with the amount of collective followers I have to get of the cast that I cast.
Think about that. Not chemistry, not interpretation, not who fits the role best, follower math. And the outcome? Predictable. Overexposure? Dull surprise. Miscasting? Clouds in tension. And contradiction fractures belief. Different problems, same result. Storytelling relies on a degree of anonymity. It relies on our ability to forget the performer and believe in the character. There's a struggle when we can't separate the role from the person playing it. But I actually was invited and did go see Marty Supreme, and I have to say, it did deserve its flowers. The strength of the film wasn't one performance, it was the world the director built. Because originality is what makes movies exciting. Fresh faces make stories believable. Leading roles, they shouldn't automatically go to the biggest name in the room. And even though Hollywood keeps choosing familiarity over fit, what audiences are really craving is intention. It's not about erasing celebrities from the screen, it's about building worlds that feel real, layered, and purposeful. Every element matters. Storytelling, cinematography, the supporting cast, sound, color, design. When all of this works together, the movie carries itself. The actor becomes part of the world and not the entire world itself. Hollywood isn't failing because actors are famous, it's failing when fame is treated as a substitute for vision.